name is Annabelle. Welcome to my channel. I am a 28-year-old artist from Victoria, Australia. Today I'm going to be taking you through my process from start to finish for my oil paintings. My oil painting process is not completely non-toxic, but it is very, very low tox. I have some health conditions that mean that I have to be careful about what I expose myself to, and because of that, I don't use any solvents, and all I use is the paint from the tube and some oil. So I'll walk you through how I work from lean to fat with my oil paints so that my paintings don't crack, and explain as we go through the process why I do each thing that I do. So what we're going to be working on are two pieces for an art swap that I'm doing with Craig Williams, who is another Australian artist based in Tasmania. So we'll be posting pieces to each other. He's been following me for a while and I've been following him for a while, and his work is really beautiful. I'll show you some pieces here. So he does acrylic paintings of native Australian birds on vintage atlases or book pages and things like that. It's really, really cool. And I just reached out to him one day and I was like, I really like your work. Do you want to do an art swap? And he said yes, which was awesome. It's a really nice way to connect with another artist. I also have a new mic that took me a while to figure out how the heck to use it. So hopefully it's working and hopefully we have some good quality sound, because I wanted to go back to be able to do some videos where I talk to you and paint at the same time. And hopefully this is going to let me do that. So yeah, all right, without further ado, let's get painting. So first we'll talk a little bit about my space. I am going to do a studio tour at some stage, but this is my work area. I have this easel here, which I actually got for free on Facebook Marketplace. I'll link the video here for you. And then over here I have another easel, which I've had probably since I was, I don't know, maybe 13. My parents got it for me for Christmas one year. So I'm pretty lucky to have this one. And I have a little note up here. I don't remember where I read this, but it says economy of brush strokes. And this is just a reminder that sometimes the less brush strokes, the better. And kind of reminds me to slow down and think about each of my brush strokes. Then down here I have my collection of brushes. They're sort of sorted into sections. I've got my kind of small to medium brushes in here. In here we've got our larger brushes and some medium but in different shapes. And then over here I've got my acrylic brushes, which I use sometimes when I'm doing acrylic underpainting. I have some acrylic brushes sitting in water here, which is not recommended, so don't do that. In here I keep vegetable oil. So I use that to get the bulk of the paint off my brushes and also have somewhere to store brushes overnight if I am too tired to clean them straight away. And I'll come back to them when I'm ready to clean them up. So you'll see it just clips off. And all of the pigment from the paints will scrub off the brushes in the bottom and fall down that grate, so the oil on top of that grate is clean. Over here I have my glass palette, which is my must-have when it comes to oil painting, because you can scrape it clean, so there's no build-up of oil paint. Here I have my trusty glass scraper, which you would have seen me use in a few videos, and my safflower oil. So I will usually use straight oil paint for my first layer, safflower oil in a very small quantity in my second layer, and if I need to do a third layer I will use a stand oil, which is thicker again, so I will show you that one. Down here I've got some of my lesser used paints and just some random kind of bits and pieces down the bottom for acrylic painting. So I've got some random oil colours and then my acrylic colours. but all of my oils that I use on a regular basis are up here. And these are all the colours that you'll see me kind of grab regularly. Another thing that I'd recommend as an artist to kind of help you save money as well is a paint tube ringer. I'll show you how this functions, but basically you'll pop the tube of paint in here, pop the end of the tube just through this little gap so that it stays in place, and then this will roll up and push the paint from the bottom of the tube. So this helps you get every ounce of paint. So the first thing I like to do is I like to prime my painting surface with gesso. This is a cheaper gesso. As I start to earn a bit more money, hopefully from my art, I will use a more expensive gesso, just because the better quality the product, the more longevity your painting has. The purpose of gesso is basically to protect the painting surface from the oils in the paint. Those oils will break down the canvas over time, so you need to prime that surface with gesso. Gesso also helps you control the texture of your painting surface as well. You can sand between coats to get it really smooth, or you can do what I do and keep the brush strokes in just to create a bit more visual interest in the painting. The next step is an acrylic wash. I use acrylic because I avoid using solvents with my oil paint, and to thin oil paint down to the consistency of a wash, you need to use a solvent. So by using acrylic, I can thin it down with water, and I avoid breathing in the toxins from the solvent. I've had a couple of questions as to why I do the orange wash. Usually I would do burnt sienna, which is this orange colour. Sometimes I'll do burnt umber or yellow ochre. Occasionally I'll do crimson just for fun. There are two main reasons I do this. The first one is to provide a mid-tone base to paint on. So this allows me to judge my values of my colours better as I put them straight onto the canvas. So this wash will keep me from overcompensating by making my paints too dark because I'm painting on a white surface. The next reason is colour theory. The main colour that I use in my landscapes is blue. You have the blue sky, you have the blue and the greens, and the complement of blue is orange. By putting the orange down, it interacts with the pigment in the blue paints and it gives off a much more luminous effect. It also means that those little spots where the canvas might peek through, it's just slightly more visual interest than if it was white. The white would be so bright it would take away from the visual effect of the values of the painting. So in between painting sessions, I keep my oil paints in this container in the freezer. So oil paint cures by oxidization, so if you can keep your oil paint in between sessions in an airtight container, in the fridge or even better the freezer, it'll keep your mixes from drying and it will help you not to waste your paint, basically by leaving it out to dry in between sessions, which I'm guilty of doing because sometimes I just don't have the energy to pack up. So here are the paints from my last painting session. In the bottom right hand corner there is a grey mix. I mix all of the leftover mixes at the end of a painting session into a neutral grey, and I will use that in my next painting session to help neutralise colours. And that way, again, I don't waste paint. So this is a top-down view of my palette. Over here I have got my toning grey, which is mixed from all the leftover mixes from my last painting session, and then I have ivory black, titanium white and lilac. Then I have a warm red and a cool red, so I've got vermilion and quinacridone magenta. And then I have 4 yellows. I find yellows a really important colour to have a lot of. I've got titanium yellow, yellow ochre, Hansa yellow, and raw sienna. Then over here I've got my neutrals. I have burnt umber, burnt sienna, and raw umber. And then over here I have my blues. I have cerulean blue hue and ultramarine blue. So I have made my sketch on my toned canvas with an Ohuhu marker, but I'm going to go over it again just to finalise it with some raw umber straight from the tube and a small brush. The brush that I use is a really old one that has been worn down to this tiny little nub, and it basically almost acts as like a stick of charcoal. So it's really stiff and really easy to just get my paint onto the canvas and kind of scrub on all of the details. What we're painting is a location in New South Wales, Australia, called the Three Sisters. It's basically kind of like a gorge with these rocks here that have been kind of worn away by the elements into 3 distinct shapes. The brightest spots in this painting, besides the sky, are going to be 2 rocks that are facing the light source here. Just outline those so I know that they're there. So I found that the first thing I like to do after I've kind of sketched in my main shapes here is I like to then paint in all of my shadows and dark masses. I don't block them in with one kind of main colour. I think about where each shadow lies in the sense of the atmosphere and how far away it is from us, and I'll mix my colours to kind of reflect that. So usually my painting method is, after I do my gesso and my stain, my painting method is usually sketch, block in my shadows with paint straight from the tube. Once I've blocked in the shadows, I'll block in my midtones and some toned down highlights. And then I'll let that layer cure. So hopefully that's what we'll achieve today. And once I've let that layer cure, I go over it with more of a modelling and detail layer. That is the layer that I will use the safflower oil in. And if I need even more detail after that has cured, I'll either use a bit more safflower oil or I will use my stand oil, which I showed you a little bit earlier. So in my first layers, I use stiff bristle brushes. In my second layer, I'll use stiff synthetic brushes, which are slightly softer. So you can see here, that's the bristle brush. And then the stiff synthetic is just a little bit softer. In my final layers, I'll use these soft bristle brushes, so they're a lot more kind of silky. And the reason we do that is it allows us to work from thin to thick with the layers of our paints. So these brushes allow us to scrub the paint onto the canvas in a thin layer. These brushes allow us to then lay the paint down on top of those thinner layers without lifting it up, and that layer of paint is a bit thicker because these brushes don't push the paint quite as far. And then these brushes here, the really soft ones, they allow us a bit more control with finer details, and they'll also lay even thicker paint or oilier paint on top of the second layer of paint without lifting it, because they're softer, so they don't dig down into the layers below. Those tips with the brushes are actually very helpful if you're going to do a la prima painting, which is when you basically complete an entire painting in one sitting, all of the layers at once. I don't always have the time or the energy to do a painting that way, so I work mine in sessions, usually with it curing in between, which doesn't always get me the effect that I'd like. It can be really, really helpful to connect your shadows because it just creates unity in the piece. So I'm going to run this shadow down here. So one thing to remember is the shape of the shadow, and this is something that I'm trying to remember, is the shape of the shadow is governed by not necessarily just the shape of the object that's casting it, but the shape of the object or plane that the shadow is being cast onto. And also, so thinking a little bit about brush strokes, like this land kind of sweeps down and then back up again. So these shadows, you can fix them later, but these shadows are going to kind of sweep up the land and sculpt out that gorge for us. I'm going to make this slightly lighter as we go further into the background. Now there's some more shadows kind of in, like on this cliff face here and in here, which I'm going to make slightly warmer. So this color, it'll be this color but slightly more purple. So I'm going to take that same mix and add a little tiny bit of crimson. Now we can cut into these shapes later with highlights, but this is just going to allow us to basically figure out where our lightest lights and darkest darks are. Now the shadows in this bit, in the photo, are almost like a blue-black, but I want to make them a really kind of saturated purple. In the photo, this shadow here is the absolute darkest tone, but in reality it would likely have had a bit more luminescence, so I'm going to try and keep that in mind. Alright, so next we'll do our lightest light, which is going to be our sky. All right, we're back after a nap and a coffee. Spicy cough got me good about 3 weeks ago, and I'm nowhere near fully recovered, so I'm taking lots of naps. So let's have a look at this. I have come to the conclusion during my nap that this cloud up here looks like a sausage, so I do need to fix that, but that might be a later problem. I do have a little bit of sky color left though, so I might be able to kind of cut into it. Oh, now we have 3 sausages. Oh dear. Okay, I might fix that later. That might be a later problem. I kind of want to get on to some other stuff, so that's really funny. All right, I reckon it's time to get in the kind of highlight the sunlit areas in the background here. This is the part of the painting that makes me a little bit nervous. I'm just gonna pull my paints closer to me. You know, I just pulled my palette closer to me on the left, and I don't know why I haven't done that sooner because it's so much more comfortable. Okay. So probably one of my best tips I can give you for yellows is I have 4 different yellows, and each yellow I use for a different part of the painting. In the background, if I'm thinking I need a yellow in my mix, I'll use burnt umber. In the midground, if I think I need a yellow, I'll use yellow ochre, and then start leaning into Naples yellow as well. From there, I will start bringing in Hansa yellow, which is similar to cadmium. I also have a yellow called titanium yellow, which is a very light lemony yellow, which I love, and I find it to be really good for sunlit areas, or also just mixing in with a lilac to get a really light grey colour. I actually haven't probably executed this quite well enough. So the contrast between different shades in the background will be very low, which I haven't quite executed here, but I'm playing with the blues. The contrast between tones in the midground will be slightly higher than the back. And then the contrast in the foreground area will be the highest between tones. So at the moment this is going to be looking a little bit flat because I'm thinking more about temperature and masses than I am about detail. So sometimes you can get away with kind of just butting colours up against each other. The change in value in hue and saturation will be enough to kind of convey a soft edge, but sometimes like this you really need to soften the edges. Something I also tend to do is I will not fully mix my colours on the palette, and I'll let them kind of intermingle and not be like too flat. So you'll see there's lots of colour variation. I reckon that we are finished our block-in layer. So where we are at now is this will dry. It's Friday now, so I'm likely to be able to come back to this on Monday and start figuring out the mess that is this whole area, because at the moment that makes no sense. But we'll see. But this is the process of painting. Now again, I'm actually too tired today to wash my brushes, so I'm going to put them all in the oil, and tomorrow I will put them through my cleaning process and I'll show you what that is. So it's been a few days and there's a couple of things I want to fix on this before I move on to the next stage. So the one part of this painting that I am really happy with is this kind of mountain in the midground here. I'm really happy with all of these shapes. Now in the background, I've decided this blue is way too green, it's too saturated. So in the right context, this blue would work, but it's not working in the context of this blue and this purple. So I'm going to fix that in the background. I need to give a little bit more kind of tonal definition in here because this is looking a bit flat and dead. And this area too, like these shapes in here are just nowhere near as interesting as here. So I want to fix those a little bit. That'll probably be part of the next phase of the painting. And obviously this whole area here it's sunlit. So at the moment it's looking a little bit just yellow and maybe slightly unrelated, but I'm definitely gonna work that in. I think in hindsight, I'm kind of happy with how the sky's looking. I just need to kind of work in some of these orange bits, where the background's kind of coming through. All in all, it's got promise, and I think that I might be able to draw it fairly close to a finish today. Today will be the second painting session. So like I said earlier, it's usually 2 to 3 painting sessions for me per piece. So this grey that I'm using is the grey that we mixed from all of the leftover colours from our last painting session, and it is pretty much a perfect kind of neutral. So at the moment I'm still painting with no mediums. This is just straight paint from the tube, and this colour I'm also going to use for some highlights in the hills. It's really just a nice warm grey, this one. See, my painting style is a lot more rough, and I think sometimes I get a little bit caught up in the details. So I've really simplified this, and now I feel like it looks a lot better. I'm really happy with this area because it's really painterly, but it's portraying what I want to portray. I was maybe a little bit too excited with the purple in the last time, so I just want to kind of neutralize it slightly with some burnt umber. So this whole area is in shadow, and this whole area here. I'm finding painting rocks like this to be a massive challenge. It is way, way out of my usual kind of landscape. Like, I live in a very flat area, so this kind of landscape's very new to me. All right, so I want to now think a little bit about this area, carving it out so it makes a little bit more sense in the painting and it's less of an eyesore. So I've just got to mix a little bit more of this purple color to help us kind of carve into this, and then we can come in and refine it a bit later. So I've got ultramarine blue, crimson, more crimson than that, and some burnt umber. So from here on out, the rest of the painting process is going to be time-lapsed. So all I really do in the next section of this video is what I've already explained. Most of this painting is done with paint straight from the tube, no oils or any additives. To sign the painting at the very end, I do add a little bit of safflower oil. I usually will tend to use more oils in my paint when I'm painting larger trees and things like that, things that I need to get really fluid shapes, whereas these little ones here that are in the distance, I can get away with just kind of little flicks here and there to convey the tree trunks and branches. So at the end of this video, you will see my whole cleaning process for my brushes and the finished piece. But this next 10 minutes or so will be mostly time lapse. And that, my friends, is my entire oil painting process and my low-tox supplies. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope you learnt something. It's been a mammoth video to make, but I've enjoyed making it. In the end, as always, I have something to say about this painting. I feel like I took the details a bit too far, maybe a little bit too photorealistic, but I had a lot of fun painting it and I learnt a lot in the process. So please drop a comment, like and subscribe. If you made it all the way to the end, please comment with the painting palette emoji so I know that you sat with me this whole time. But I hope you have a lovely day and I will talk to you next time. Bye.